You listen to the AZ Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Mike Luke, joined by Ben White, joined by the precocious Ben Schuster, John Schuster. I'm just kidding with you. I'm merely Mike Luke. Arizona wins. What was the final score today, Shu?
92-73, Mike Luke.
92-73. That is called a cover for the Wildcats. This was a game that was not pretty in the first half. And I was going on there. I'm going through the notes, and I'm like, all right, well, here we go again. More crappy perimeter defense, more turnovers. And Ben White, they said there will be none of that. We are going to take control, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, they attacked that rim in the second half. I mean, Keshad Johnson went crazy. Caleb Love went crazy with some of the passes. Umar Ballo, leader of men.
Umar Ballo. Did you get that?
We got a reference on the broadcast. The leader of men, Umar Ballo, 1,000 career points. So, yeah, a total 360. I mean, this team has struggled, you noted, from the perimeter defensively the majority of the last couple of weeks. And, you know, you thought, okay, Utah really shouldn't have the personnel and really doesn't have the pedigree to tee up with Arizona, obviously, just from an athleticism standpoint, a shooting standpoint. But they did get some good looks to start that first half, but it gradually faded away, and Arizona's defense came to play there in the second half. And more importantly, Mike, they got the ball inside, which, you know, we've talked about at times over the last couple of weeks, something they need to do more of, and they responded accordingly.
John Schuster.
A fair amount of this game was kind of what I think a lot of us have more or less expected from a lot of Arizona games this year. Team across from you is pretty good, but you know, Arizona's got a little bit more talent. You're going to see enough in this in a matchup like this to have material to criticize. Certainly early on in the first half, Arizona's perimeter defense fell under that category, and Utah, by virtue of being, I think, 6 for 16 at the break in the first half, was able to take enough and, more importantly, hit enough that kept them close. But then, you know, Arizona was able to make the necessary adjustments and went on two notable runs in the second half, 12-0 run that pretty much separated the game enough for Arizona to be able to do what it wanted to. And in the end, you know, I think they played a pretty good team. I think Utah's decent. They're maybe bubble.
They don't stink. They definitely don't
tournament
stink.
Bubble good. You know, they're going to win their share of games. They're not a threat to go particularly deep if they get in, but they're a team that can do some things reasonably well and has some talent on the roster. So they're moving again in a positive direction as they take the same adventure that Arizona does eventually into another conference. But as tonight went, you guys noted, I think Love clearly played a major role in Arizona's second half separation, and Johnson stepped up as well. And those are two guys, and this has come up rightfully in conversation as well, that is sort of representative of what Arizona has this year that perhaps it hasn't had in some of in Tommy Lloyd's other 2 years. And it's that type of thing that can be difficult for the opposition.
Yeah, and see that, but that's what these kind of weekends though, or weeks are for me though. When you have come off like just a crushing loss like you had against Stanford, where basically you just got your butt kicked against a bad team. These games, I think you just need blowouts. These were overmatched teams in both of these games, Colorado and Utah. Now, Utah played much better than Colorado did, obviously, in the first half, but they kind of succumbed to Arizona's athleticism as well. But, Ben, Arizona just needed to get a butt kicking in there, and they got exactly that.
You need blowouts, and I think more importantly, you need really good games from your two best players. And then that's what you got over the last two games here. And Keshad Johnson was fantastic there in the second half, especially just getting to the rim. I mean, Utah gave him some wide open looks, and he did play well in the first half. But we talked about this with this team. When you have two guys in those players, why wouldn't Arizona just go to the rim at every single possession there, especially to establish the tone in the majority of these games? I mean, this team really does play at its best when it's playing from inside out. And I think that's exactly what they did today. And, you know, I think the benefit too, as well, is when you have somebody like Johnson who's able to get going early, it's only going to make things easier for your guards. I mean, you look back to the Stanford game, maybe a little bit more so to the Purdue game, but up until today, Johnson's been pretty quiet the last few games. Yeah. And I think he was somebody who you needed to get involved early. And when you do that, it only makes it easier for the rest of the team because you're in a position now where Love and Boswell are not having to go toe-to-toe with the opposition's guards every single possession. And I think you saw that in the loss against Stanford. I think you saw that in some of the other moments where Arizona has struggled over the last couple of weeks, where the ball movement is stagnant, as Shu has noted multiple times. Offensively, things are just entirely out of rhythm. But when you're able to go to Johnson and when you're able to go to Ballo early on and establish rhythm like they did tonight, I mean, they ran away with this game just in the paint there in the second half, Mike, and that's what you saw.
John Schuster, have I ever told you about the Desert Financial Credit Union? I know I might have, but I'm not sure.
It comes up every now and again, but I every time your reads and the information that you provide is so good that I can't wait to hear more about it the next time.
By the way, everybody, keep an eye on this ASU game for we need updates. I would have it on in the background. But anyways, back to Desert Financial Credit Union.
76-73 ASU.
What is this?
They just won. They won by 3, 76-73.
They were cheating. All right, Desert Financial Credit Union. When you get a free checking account online, get $200 in bonuses. Get started by visiting desertfinancial.com/200. All kinds of good stuff. You might look at the background of John Schuster and you say, man, that's somebody that has Desert Financial Credit Union. That is 1,000% what it is. The precocious Ben White in California, probably the same thing. Now, let's do the Desert Financial Credit Unions by the numbers, Mr. Jacob Franklin. All right. This is called being better than the other team. 60-40, 55-27. Arizona was able to lock this down in the second half because it felt like in the first half, Utah couldn't miss a shot. That is still a little bit of a worry for me. The defense that we're going to get to, but overall, Arizona did what they needed to do in the second half.
Some hard-hitting analysis there, right there, Mike Luke. But yeah, I thought from a shooting perspective, I mean, 62%. I mean, come on, you just blow the lights out. 55% from three at halftime as well. You know, I'm looking back to the halftime numbers, and it was only a 3-point game. So you kind of thought to yourself at the time, okay, if this keeps up, there's no way Arizona isn't winning here by at least 10 plus. And you gradually saw that there. And I think the rebounding, right, is also a big part of it. And really points in the paint as well. I mean, Arizona had 50 points in the paint. Utah had 26. I mean, that's just crazy right there, and just shows you the mismatch that Utah was dealing with there with Johnson and in Ballo. And I think, you know, they were able to hang for a good majority of that first half. And like you mentioned, they had a good shooting half. But when you got those two guys up front and what Ballo and Johnson were doing tonight, when you got those two guys hitting the way they do, I mean, it's really hard to slow that down. And this team was at its best tonight.
All right, now how about the sage of the Southwest, John Schuster?
Oh,
I like that.
Wow, that it was very spicy. I was fairly just a bit. You know, I think there are a lot of teams out there that are kind of like Utah, and a lot less teams out there that are like Arizona. So that kind of athletic advantage is the type of thing that, you know, more often than not, Arizona's in a position to be able to execute. And again, this is a game that I think really fell under a lot of expectations, you know, but on the defensive end, you can kind of see as well that, you know, teams that are still trying to develop a little bit, there are holes in the arsenal. And Utah has some issues, certainly on the defensive end, and with an ability to catch up. And Arizona, obviously, with 50 points in the paint, was in a position where it could exploit the inside, too. And so, you know, you get that kind of combination. And to Arizona's credit, they were smart enough to recognize, and, you know, and everybody should, that, you know, you're smart enough to be able to recognize that you got better talent and you've got some mismatches that can take advantage of certain situations. And Arizona was good enough to move the ball around well enough. And additionally from that, get guys into spots that allow them better opportunities to score.
All right, Chef Duarte, there will be no my bad Boswell movement. We've been over this. You're smarter than me. You already know this. There will be no my bad Boswell, because I always thought Boswell was good. I was frustrated he was not playing well. My bad only occurs if I don't think you're good. So Gunnar Maldonado, Pelle Larsson, they will not accept a seat with Kylan Boswell because they are in different stratospheres. We will get to Rolly's Mexican restaurant at the end of the show, though. I went there. That is absolutely fantastic. I would vouch for it for anybody. Gene M says Mike's head has to be very, very big after the Leader of Men reference from Matt Muehlbach. It is. I'm a little bummed the Four Peaks didn't get in there. He already apologized to me.
There was another reference, though, too.
Oh, yeah, the Swedish jackknife, or what was it?
The Swedish Army knife.
The Swedish Army knife, also known as the Swiss Army knife.
That was something. Didn't Brad try to bring that up the other night? Didn't Brad try to fit that in the last post-game show?
Yeah,
wasn't that a Brad Alice effort?
Yeah, it wasn't.
That you, being the master of plagiarism and the master of social media, decided to openly steal without proper citation. Take the credit for yourself, and then it spreads like the virus that it deserves to be.
Well, when you're hanging out with the sage of the Southwest, that's what's going to happen.
That's the last thing that's going to happen when you're hanging out with the sage of the Southwest.
All right, now let's talk about some of these players, though, that got back on the winning track. Keshad Johnson, listen. Oumar Ballo, leader of men, there's always going to be certain games where it just feels like it's just not an Oumar type game. It just doesn't quite feel like it's a little bit too fast for him, whatever. But Keshad Johnson is a player that every single game I think should be able to flirt with double figures. He should be able to get 14-8, 14-10, just off effort, just by running the court, just off of his pure athleticism. Ben One White, we saw that today. We need more of this.
Yeah, first game in 4 weeks where he's hit double digits. 8 against Colorado, 8 against Stanford, 5 against Cal, which was rather perplexing, and then only 7 against FAU there. I think the thing with him, and I think he's somebody who you have to really position him well and get him set up. And I think that falls a lot on Arizona's guards. We have seen over the course of the last few weeks, Arizona, I think, take more perimeter shots than they need to take. When you're built the way they are, when you have the athleticism matchup, when you can play inside out, why wouldn't you start every single game? By and large, I get matchups sometimes can be challenging, but tonight especially, by and large, why wouldn't you start every single game by getting the ball to him? And when they do that, I mean, good things happen. Like we mentioned a little bit earlier, it opens things up for the rest of the offense. And he clearly is, I think Love is clearly the best player, but he clearly is 1B. I wouldn't put him as 2. I'd put him 1B just because from an impact standpoint, if he does not play well, if he's not scoring at least 15 to 20 points, I don't think Arizona can win the big games, quite honestly. So I think that Love is clearly more talented, don't get me wrong, but from an importance standpoint, he's right there.
I will utilize him at the old Greek tablet and call him Beta.
Shoot, let me ask you this. You've been talking all year about how, or, not all year, the last couple of years. About, heck, you've been talking about it for centuries, about how you wanted to see more ball movement, about how you thought it was a little bit more stagnated in the last couple of weeks. John Schuster did not like that. Did you see a little bit more ball movement, or was this just a team against an overmatched team?
Well, I think it helps clearly when Arizona moves the ball a little bit better. And it's one of the things, it's exactly what I was about to get to, that that guys like Ballo and especially Johnson can benefit by the extra pass situation. And as long as once Arizona's going to need to do this a lot more consistently, I think, in the half court. And we're talking about a team that scored 92 tonight. But I think Utah has some pretty notable limitations on the defensive end that Arizona was allowed to exploit. Arizona is a bad matchup pretty clearly for Utah in some key spots. But still, if you're able to run your stuff well, then that gives you a better opportunity to keep teams a little bit behind what it is that they ultimately want to do. And I think Johnson was a benefactor of that tonight. Come tournament time, I'm hopeful that his activity rate increases to the kind of thing that we saw earlier this year and didn't see, December's now behind you. So because with his athleticism out there, it gives Arizona so much more versatility, and they can even kind of pivot around it a little bit. And he'll be a benefactor, not necessarily from plays that are called from him, but every now and again, if you've made 3 passes on the offensive possession, you can make 4 or 5. Johnson gets those. And then if your defense is scrambling a little bit and somebody takes a shot, Johnson's athleticism allows you to get into position and maybe get the offensive rebound on the follow.
I think we're avoiding the elephant in the room here that we don't really want to discuss because it's obvious, but at the same time, I think we got to discuss it. These guys clearly went to Circle K at some point today.
Well, everybody who's famous in this town apparently does. So that would make ideal sense.
Clearly.
I would assume when you watch Keshad Johnson, that is a member of the Circle K, and it's the Inner Circle and it's not just because his name begins with K. Join Inner Circle for free by downloading the Circle K app today. Terms and conditions apply at participating locations. Visit CircleK.com for details. Ben One White, do you think that you could find Keshad Johnson at Circle K?
I would think you would be able to, yes.
All right. I'm not going to vouch for it, but I think there's a good chance. Also, Empire Flooring. Now, a lot of times I just make stuff up, but Empire
Absolutely
Flooring,
not.
No, I know. Empire Flooring literally redid my parents' floor, and they are very happy about it. Ted Wardo likes it a great deal. Ted Wardo enjoys lounging on it. They just purchased a service dog as well. They will be lounging on it as well. They can help you just like they help my parents. My parents are useless, but they had help with Empire Flooring. Love you, Mom. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can receive a $350 off discount when you use promo code PHNX. Restrictions apply. See empiretoday.com/PHNX for details. All right, now let's get to the Swedish pinball, Pelle Larsson. By the way, do we think this is Alan Keith?
I would suggest that's I'll leave that up to you.
I think there's a very
I'll
good
let
chance.
that interpretation up to you.
I think there's a very good chance this is Alan Keith. Big Allard traffic pal.
A shout out.
Yes. All right. But
that was all.
So anyways, let's Pelle Larsson. Why can't we get this out of Pelle Larsson every single game? Again, my bad, Pelle. I was wrong. I always preface it by saying I was wrong. But it feels to me when you are an effort player, when you are a player like him, you shouldn't have games where you're Mom is listening. Oh, not good. Hi, Mom. Hi, Janet. If you don't like me, blame this woman right here. Mom, and put in there Empire Flooring is true. It's not. It's true. So
useless parents do not text on this post-game show. So their ability to multitask and do many great things is clearly in play.
Pelle Larsson, though.
Pelle Larsson.
Yes.
He scored 1,000 points for his career. Right.
Why can't we get this out of Pelle Larsson every single game? Again, I keep asking this because, with players like a Damon Stoudemire, you're going to have streaky games because you're pulling up from, the cactus. You're taking a lot of tough shots, all that. Pelle Larsson's game isn't predicated off that. It's predicated off cutting to the hoop, defense, taking the 1-2 dribble, et cetera, et cetera. I want this every game out of Pelle because I think he's more than capable of doing it.
Yeah, I think with him, you just said it right there. His game is defense first. And I think from a shooting perspective, he's not expected. And I don't know if he's even capable of doing, what somebody like Love and Boswell are. From a scoring perspective, that's fixed. And I think from an energy standpoint, you have him out there to try to force some steals, try to get in some passing lanes, draw some fouls. Now, granted, with him, like you mentioned, it can be a love-hate relationship because I think, a lot of times when they call fouls, they're either spot on or they're rather head scratching. And I think when you have that type of player, it's going to be tough to see a guy score 15 to 20 a game. It just is. And granted, tonight he had 13, most of that came in the second half. But I think if you're getting 8 to 12 out of him and, he's forcing a few steals and he's playing well on the defensive end, I think that's what his role is, Mike, at this point.
And again, they scored 92. So it's not like the offense struggled and shot 60% from the floor. So there are a lot of things that were good about a lot of players tonight. But Mike, who do you think is the most consistent player on this team if you don't think it's Larsson? And it's fair to suggest that Larsson is not the most consistent player on this team. But who do you think is? Then start ranking them.
It's a great...
And at what point do you get to Larsson?
Probably about 3. I think what... And I realize I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth here, but you know what? It makes it easier if you don't know what you're talking about to be able to speak out of both sides like I'm doing. But I think it's Caleb Love, and everybody's going to say, Mike, Caleb Love has 5 for 29 games. The difference to me, though, with Caleb Love, though, is the attention that he attracts, and that every single game he is bringing it. He is going to be somebody that is always has his head down. He's going to force the action. Again, sometimes he's not going to always, be effective. But as far as from a consistency effort perspective, I think it's been Caleb Love. And quite frankly, I don't think it's been close. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen a game since mid-November where he hasn't had at least 10 points. And I think from a scoring perspective, even if he's 5 for 29, he's still going to find a way to get his, right? And from a shooting perspective, it's hot hit or miss. But I think what's so cool about him, and it sets really the energy and the tone for the rest of the team, is even if he's not hitting shots, Mike, he's still doing a lot of other stuff out there. I mean, defensively,
Right.
he is locked onto his guy. From a passing standpoint, I think he's come a long way. I'm not saying he's a pass first guard by any means, but he has come a long way.
That, Ben White.
Yeah, he has come a long way in terms of getting other guys involved. And, he's the most consistent player that this team has, I think, far and away. And then I think you have to look at somebody like Johnson and some of these other guys below that. But without Love, I mean, Arizona's not in a lot of these games this year. They're just not, to be honest.
And I think it becomes a more, I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Schuster, the floor is yours.
Oh, all right. I think once you get past Love in that conversation, you get a little bit more semantic uncertainty here. Is it Ballo? Maybe. We just talked earlier in the show about how Johnson was kind of a no-show for a lot of December. It's certainly not Boswell, who has struggled for a good portion of the last few games and finally seems to hopefully be getting a little bit more acclimated. That helps. And Larsson is a guy who's basically a punching bag on a fairly regular basis. So now you're through most of your starting lineup and you're starting to try to figure out, okay, beyond Love, who's the most consistent player on this team? So I think a lot of what plays into that is the depth that's on your roster as well. Because perhaps the lesson here to some degree, and I get it, we want Larsson to be a really consistent, solid player who fills the stat sheet. We kind of want Johnson to be the same guy. Those are great accolades. You know that Love's going to take big shots. You hope that Boswell gains his confidence and everything flows offensively. And Ballo pretty much plays the role that he needs to play to be able to ultimately wear teams down and be able to separate maybe over the course of the last 10 minutes of the game. But hard to argue that. But you get into these situations where the lesson here is that you need depth. Because come tournament time, guys are going to have off nights. And hopefully you'll have some guy in the dugout who's able to step in and fill the void if one of your major players is struggling. And that the rest of the team is talented enough to be able to pick that sort of thing up to give you a chance to move through the tournament. So it is sort of I agree with you on Love being the most consistent player. I think that's relatively clear.
You know what it is, though, more so for me than anything, as far as just like the production, it's just the effort. It's there's games where it just doesn't feel like Pella's totally engaged. There's been games where it doesn't feel like Kylan Boswell's been totally engaged. I mean, Keshad Johnson's the one player that I didn't think we would be having this discussion about just being fully engaged because he's an energy hustle type player. But for a while, he hasn't really been that. I guess that's more of I'm totally cool with if a guy goes 4 of 18. Again, I don't want it to happen, but I don't question the effort. I guess that's why can't we get this every single game, I guess is my question for both of you.
I mean, I think when you look at these other guards and what's been clear to me in some of the games where Arizona has struggled, I mean, the Stanford game comes to mind. When the shot's not falling for a lot of these guys, I think it really hurts them in other areas of their play. I think defensively, things get a little bit messy. I think guys tend to get lost. And Love has been the one constant. I mean, obviously, he's far and away the best player. We all know that. But I think he's in a position where he is because consistently he's giving it his all every single possession. Defensively, passing, getting guys involved. If he has to maybe switch on the defensive side, he's able to do that. And, for whatever reason this year, I think Boswell is somebody who is certainly a dog who has shown, over the last year and a half that he can be a big time shot maker. But, when he was going 7 for 27 over the last 2 weeks or so, there wasn't a whole lot else he was doing on the defensive end or anything else along those lines. So I think that's what the challenging part is. And again, you hope that this week is kind of that blueprint for what we're going to see, leading up to March, right? Because the Pac-12 we know isn't great. Granted, there have been some fluky games like tonight against ASU, but at the same time, I mean, this team is far and away better than any other team in this conference. And you hope that you get that consistency from all these starters. You had 5 guys in double figures tonight. And to Shu's point earlier, you hope two guys who step up and who are there if need be, actually three. I'll add Krivas into this discussion because we haven't brought him up yet. But you really hope that Lewis and Bradley are those guys that can alleviate maybe some of those challenges where, Boswell or one of these other guards might be having a shooting slump or an issue on the defensive side. Those guys can come right in, give you energy, give you points, and just keep Arizona on track. At least that's what you hope.
Pugs and hugs with the $2.99 super sticker. Appreciate you, my friend. All right, John Schuster, go ahead.
Let's throw something else out there, too, as a possibility. Arizona is a team right now that gets up for big games, mostly on the road, and the effort play at home. They love home cooking. Arizona beats teams at home by, 25 points a game, give or take. Whatever the number is, it's nonsense.
And it doesn't matter. They could be good. They could be bad, whatever.
Yeah, right. They obliterate Colorado the other night by 47. They win tonight by 19. And we're nitpicking a lot of odd things. And so I'm wondering if a lot of the effort thing is that the crowd actually helps Arizona quite a bit and some of these specific players to provide that kind of energy that we expect out of Arizona. And in some situations on the road, in relatively quiet, neutral venues.
Like Stanford, a high school gym.
Something like that. Even the Florida Atlantic game, which was extraordinarily well played, but there weren't a whole hell of a lot of people there. Mostly Arizona people by far, but
They're
it was
all at Circle K.
5,000 people. They all went to Circle K and then tried to make their way over to the gym, but the line was so long at Circle K that a lot of them got stuck and then ultimately didn't make the game on time. It's very frustrating when everybody who's part of this podcast is all part of the inner circle, because that's a really big.
It's a big circle.
Keeps growing. The inner keeps growing in that circle, and that becomes good news for Circle K. But anyway, I'm wondering if this is one of the things that Arizona as a team, and it falls under the possibility of the boredom thing that I think I brought up a couple times, because I'm uncertain exactly what this issue may be if there's an inconsistency. So here's the good news: you go on the road next week. You get to find out whether you're a step slow on the pick and roll, whether you don't block out as consistently as you used to, whether your shot's a little flat. Whatever little things go into the effort and frustration thing that have taken us from thinking that Arizona is a legitimately daunting foe as far as college basketball is concerned, to a team loaded with talent that now we're not entirely convinced has the mechanisms necessary to go absolutely as deep as their talent would suggest. So maybe this is something that you just got to you've got to figure out how to get that effort, even if you're away from the friendly confines where Arizona just wins games easily.
Yeah, I think there's going to be certain players, though, that they need. Listen, Kylan Boswell has to be good. And again, I'm going to be okay if he doesn't have, great scoring games, but he's more than capable, again, of being somebody that can initiate, can orchestrate the offense. And on top of that, he can also be kind of a defensive bulldog. There's no reason that he shouldn't be, because again, I hate to keep beating this horse, but people would say, yeah, I know, I don't even have a horse, but, like with Kirk Kriisa was just limited, man. I know he talked a lot, all of that. I know, and there's going to be a guy on YouTube that's going to say, why are you talking about Kirk Kriisa? That was last year. It is to give a frame of reference. Kirk Kriisa was just not as physically capable as Kylan Boswell is. Kylan Boswell is a better basketball player. I think, again, Boswell to me has to be somebody, even if he's not on the all-conference team, he's got to feel like an all-conference caliber player out there. Because again, when you're at the point guard spot, you could be a difference maker. And we've seen him many, many times be a difference maker. And that's what I want out of him.
And I think he can be, Mike. If he's shooting the way he is the last two games, he certainly can be. And as long as Arizona, in terms of opposition, right, as long as that team that you're facing fears Kylan Boswell with the ball in his hands, I think you're going to be okay. I don't think that he needs to shoot, 6 threes a game or anything, but I think offensively he's proven, and I think he gets the respect that, he deserves. Granted, I know it's been a tough couple of weeks. he does deserve it. But it's been a tough couple of weeks, but he's shown you he can do other things. I mean, defensively, he can hold his own. And I think offensively, right, he's pretty good at finding the shot, even if it's not from three. So I would only imagine that, hopefully he is out of that slump and at a point where he's regained his confidence and he remembers that, okay, if I'm not hitting threes, there's still a million other things that this team needs me to do, right? And, remembering that he is kind of the point, well, he's obviously the point guard, but he's the forefront of what they're trying to do offensively, because without him setting it up, it just doesn't happen. I mean, Keshad Johnson, I think, is another big factor the last couple of weeks, and I think it directly correlates with the way that Boswell has played. I think when Boswell doesn't play well, Johnson isn't going to play well, because Johnson is not going to get the ball as much, and it's going to be hard for him to get some better looks. So again, I think he's huge, and it's kind of a domino effect, because if he doesn't play well, there are other guys on this team, particularly in the front court, that are going to be impacted by it.
But Mike, one of the things you also touched on, and I think, it's simple. You don't want bad shooting to lead to bad defense, not blocking out on the offensive end. All the effort stuff that you're talking about, right, to a large degree falls under that category. If you're having a bad shooting night, you can still do things that create benefit for you on the floor. And what happens, and Boswell, I think, is probably the most visual guy who's guilty of this perhaps so far, but Larsson is certainly high up on that list too. If Larsson is number 2 or 3 in terms of consistency, he's also 2 or 3 maybe in terms of where effort kind of, if one thing doesn't go particularly well, it maybe spreads out a little bit too. And those are areas where if Arizona can just recognize that you don't need to be a 30-point scorer. And I feel like Larsson's this guy because he's sort of always played this way.
Yeah. Where you kind of are what you are. Yeah.
But to your point, being are what you are shouldn't hurt your effort across a multitude of areas. If you're not shooting particularly well from 3-point range, okay, so what? Don't screw up. And he's the one guy who you regularly notice around picks has a problem staying with a good 3-point shooter. And that is something that at some point, and I'm not sure, I'm just bouncing stuff out here. I'm not sure if Larsson is making the mistakes or if he's trying to cover for other people who he thinks are. And I think at some point defensively, if it's the latter, then Larsson has to be a selfish defender. And if somebody else is going to get beat, well, that's their problem. Right. I may be completely wrong about that. And the reality is it's just Larsson who's getting beat all the time. But if it falls a little bit under the category where you're trying to be the air quote leader, and part of leadership is trying to guide other people through what the defensive schemes are supposed to be, and it's hurting you as a response, well, maybe a little selfishness isn't that bad, because that effort aspect, the thing we like about Larsson when Larsson plays well is that he's good across the board. But he becomes frustrating if he's not good at A and then not good at B, or in the Greek sense, not good at alpha and not good at beta. And, you get the point. So those are the things I think that Arizona probably has to try to, work through. Just because you're having an off shooting night shouldn't affect everything else.
You know what? Also, that you never have to worry about an off night. That's the BetMGM Sportsbook app. This thing runs like a machine, all 24/7, as the kids would say. Check it out, BetMGM. I mean, shoot, you can vouch for this. You've used the BetMGM Sportsbook app.
Oh, I most certainly have.
Ben White, you can't use it.
Not where I am right now, but I've used it.
Okay, well, you can't, dude, being in California. All right, now. Sign up for BetMGM. Use bonus code PHNX. Place your first BetMGM Sportsbook wager through BetMGM Sportsbook mobile app of at least $10. If that bet loses, your bonus bets will be available once your initial wager is settled. Check out the show notes for details, and let's hear Shane Diefenbach with the disclaimer.
Problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Colorado, D.C., Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, New Jersey, Nevada, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming. Call 877-8-HOPENY or text HOPENY 467-369 New York. Call 1-800-327-5050 Massachusetts. 21 plus to wager. Please gamble responsibly. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP Arizona. 1-800-BETS-OFF Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help Michigan. 1-800-981-0023 Puerto Rico in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. U.S. promotional offers not available in D.C., New York, or Ontario.
All right. Now, one other one that we also got to get in there, the Gila River Resorts and Casinos. All right, we have never stayed there, but we have seen the blue waves. John Schuster and I, when we got done hanging out behind, I almost said John Calipari, Frank Caliendo. Different Italian.
Now I've heard John Calipari does an amazing Frank Caliendo impression.
He really does. It is flawless. But anyways, we've seen the Gila River Resorts and Casino, and guess what? The lines were backed up to get in there, and it wasn't merely because of those little blue waves, which actually are pretty cool. Check it out. You do you at Gila River Resorts and Casinos. Visit playatgila.com for more details. Their state-of-the-art gaming floor has it all with 800 slot machines, 15 blackjack tables. You name it, they've got it. All right. Now, it's going to be a little bit of a shorter post game today. I got to go hang out with somebody very important at the U of A. But I want to get your guys' take though on the defensive coordinator at Arizona. Johnny Nansen has moved on to the University of Texas. There is a lot, but there is a big movement to make for Dwayne Aquina to become the defensive coordinator 2.0 here at the U of A. I am all for this because here's where I'm at with Dwayne Aquina. We know that he can coach defense. I don't want him anywhere near the offense. We've seen him as an offensive coordinator, but I 1000% want Dwayne Aquina as the DC because next year is almost a go for broke year, in my opinion, for Arizona football. And that Schuster's mentioned this a million times. Arizona football has never strung together back-to-back really good seasons. Now, they've come close, but they've never been able to string back-to-back good seasons. Dwayne Aquina was the one difference that came over from the previous from the team 2 years ago stinking on defense and being maybe the worst in the country to being one of the best in the conference. The guy knows defense. I would like to see him be the defensive coordinator because I think that he's made a huge contribution to watching him at practice. He's got every bit as much energy as he has in the past. Shu and then Ben, I would like to see Dwayne Aquina become the defensive coordinator.
What I look for kind of in this capacity in regards to the way that Arizona's defense improved as significantly as it did, going from disaster to
pretty good.
Pretty good. And in a real short period of time, I would like to see continuity in whatever it is the defensive vision is that Jed Fish ultimately has for the program. The good news in terms of the potential of that continuity is that Aquina is in the program and to some degree hopefully understands what it is that Fish is trying to accomplish and can adjust accordingly in that capacity. But one of the things that I liked last year with Arizona, especially defensively, is their ability to adjust on the fly. I think during the course of the game, they had a pretty good game plan as to how they wanted to attack the opposition, what they wanted to do. But in game situations, oftentimes early on, they'd give up a lot of yards or maybe even some points fairly early. And then it seemed like, okay, this is what we talked to you about during the course of the week. This is how they are going about it. So this is why we talked about this and what we need to do to change to make the necessary adjustments. That was the thing that I was the most optimistic about Arizona from a defensive standpoint, was their ability to adjust during the game. And if Aquina is the guy who can keep that kind of continuity in place, that's fine. If it's somebody else who Fish believes is better at keeping that continuity in place, and that's fine as well. Aquina certainly, has spent a lot of time in this program, but we will find out whether Fish believes he is the guy for that job. But based on the overall vision that I think Arizona was able to improve and implement, that's what I'm at this stage much more interested in continuity that worked, and we'll see if Arizona can do that at the next step.
Ben, one way.
Well, I think too, you have a blueprint that works, right? And I think coaching is very important, but from a talent standpoint, you bring back pretty much everybody on that defense, and I think that's really what you're looking at. I mean, let's be honest here, guys. 2 years ago in 2022, a lot of people thought our defensive coordinator who was leaving was not very good at his job. And then flash forward to last year, you see how that changed. So I think from a search perspective, they're obviously looking to disrupt it as little as possible. I think that's what she was hinting at. And I think Aquina is going to be involved one way or the other. But if there is a candidate out there who can bring something maybe from a recruiting edge, has proven himself at another position and maybe somebody who has aspirations to be a head coach someday, I think they're going to look at it. But I think either way, Mike, Akina is going to be involved, heavily involved in one way, shape, or form. Even if he's not the DC, I think he'll be still very prominent and important to what they're doing defensively.
What was wild about going to practices is just watching, and again, Johnny Nansen obviously did a very good job, but Dwayne Akina was the one that controlled just from an outsider's perspective, looked like he controlled the field. He was the one that was jumping up and down, that was going sideline to sideline, that was yelling, that was getting in people's faces. It was really interesting to watch just how much of an imprint it felt like he had on there, and his energy level at that level was still immense. I would love to see him get that chance because, like I said, I think if Arizona can string together 2 straight 10-win seasons, no matter what happens with Jedd Fisch, and I think there's going to be good news. It's going to be coming down the pike. I think it becomes a more interesting job because you've strung together some success. On that note, before we sign off, Rolly's Mexican Food on 12th Avenue. Shu, have you been here?
No.
You need to go there.
That's what I've heard.
It's very scrumptious. I could not speak more highly of it than I will give a food review on Monday about it, though.
Ooh,
but like I said, I got to sign off just a little bit early today. But for Ben White, for John Schuster, for the faceless Jacob Franklin behind the scenes, I am Mike Luke. You've been listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast.
We all silly like the mayor.